Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more information about how to join us at officehours.global. If you have joined us and become part of the community and are in Makana, you are the producers. You decide what we talk about, how we talk about it, and just the entire direction of the show. This is a show for you. First hour is general discussion about any question you have around media and virtual production. Second hour is something we've decided to spend a little bit more time on. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about second hours. Always tempted to do this on Sundays, but I don't like giving up the Sundays, the great conversations we have on Sunday to talk about something logistical. So Mondays oftentimes become this every once in a while, and we're just going to talk about what you want to see more of or less of in the second hours. Tomorrow we're TBD, and Jeffrey Powers talked to me about Tuesday or tomorrow morning. And then Wednesday is we're going to talk about video in the Olympics. We talked about the Olympics last week, and I thought, oh, we'll just talk about all of it in one day. And then some of our members who were at the Olympics showed up, and so all we did is talk about audio. So that became a great session. If you haven't seen it, it's back there on YouTube. But we'll talk about the video production. We'll look at graphics and what's going on and how they're approaching it, and talk a little bit about that. Some people may join on Wednesday. We'll see how that goes. Thursday, we're going to talk about, there's been a request to talk more about digital first events. What are they? And do they have any ROI? Is it really worth doing? So we're going to talk a little bit about that on Thursday. Friday, IT security, another heavily requested thing within our second hours. We're going to talk about how to protect your shows, how to protect your office, and what that all means. Saturday is returning to the long day. So we've got education at 8 o'clock, and then we have Nick Justison is returning, and we're going to talk about metahumans again, but we're going to do it very slowly so that we can all keep up. So we're going to be talking about that. Metahumans is great for pre-visualization and for a lot of different entertainment coming in, and I think it's important for us to know it. So if you're interested, it'll be more of a lab session. This is less Q&A. We're going to literally just open it up and all be working on it together. And then we're cooking with Damayanti Gajar, who is birthday it is today. Anyway, so we'll be cooking from 12 to 2 on Pacific Standard Time on Saturday. So we'll have more information about that tomorrow for you. But if you feel like cooking with Damayanti, it's definitely worth it. It's really, really a great experience. All right, Bill, let's jump into the questions.
Absolutely. Good morning, all. Andy Carluccio, our friend here in Washington, D.C., is up with the first question. He said, we've developed a few open source projects as an Office Hours community. How should this work be hosted, organized, and archived? He's wondering.
I think that there's a thing called GitHub that seems to be really popular for this kind of thing. I actually don't know as much about it. I'm 100% behind us, taking what we've figured out here and making it available. I think for Andy, who's developed most of that, it's really up to you on how you do that. So I'm more interested in having the knowledge that we are creating here get distributed out, make sure that other people can use it and develop their own communities. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Maybe Ken could put up a page that if you have something on GitHub that it could be a small little blurb and a link to that page.
Yeah, let's put it up on GitHub first, and then slowly figure out where on the web page we'll put it. But I think definitely, I mean, it's up to the folks that wrote the code, in my opinion, about where it goes. But I'm totally open to it being widely distributed. Next question.
Comes from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas, and Rupert says, "How was the Kenn and Leo Office Hours review show?"
Neither Kenn or Leo are here. So we don't know yet. So Kenn and Leo, for those of you they're working on putting together basically a review of Office Hours. What were some of the highlights and so on and so forth. So they're putting that together, and it's going to be on Mondays, we think. And I think that they're still figuring out some of the details, but stay tuned for that. Next question.
Since they're out of London, I wonder if they're going to change the hours. Do you know when it's?
No, they're going to do it in their morning, our night. So it'll be like 10:30 at night, our time. Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yep.
All right, Juan C. Robles comes up next out of Mexico, and his question is, just by curiosity, when can we have a behind the scenes of the setup of the panel in Office Hours?
Let's plan that someone put that into the second hour, and we'll plan that for next week. I think that would be great to put in there. I don't like surprising people with it, but everyone's got to clean up. I have to clean up. So we'll let's plan that for next week though. We'll do it behind the scenes again. We've done that I think once or twice before. We'll do it again. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, just to mention that in the YouTube, I think there's at least 2 or 3 episodes where they go through some of that on the second hours.
Yeah, so we'll make it. We'll aim that for next week. Next question.
Whoops, excuse me. Rupert McRae is back, and this time out of Dallas. Zoom has an audio watermark feature that can embed a user's personal information into the audio if they record a meeting. This can help Zoom identify which participant recorded the meeting. Is anyone familiar with this process?
Go ahead, Jason.
I believe it's largely proprietary. I've looked at all the public-facing documents of it, and unless I'm missing something, I think it's pretty close to the best.
It's pretty common within corporations to have either video or audio or both embedded into the system. And some of it can be relatively subtle and some of it can be obvious. If it's obvious, it's usually there to remind the users that we know who you are. If it is subtle or super or almost secret, then it's there for them to find it. But most large corporations have some version of this built into either their built-in system or a system that they use. And I think Zoom is probably making that available for that reason. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, maybe I didn't put it in the question, but the documentation on the Zoom documentation specifically says it's inaudible. So they're obviously embedding something there when you enable that feature.
Yeah, so that is the more we want to know who it is. We don't necessarily want to warn them that we're doing it, and it's so that you can ferret out people who are recording things that they shouldn't be. So that's and for corporate security, it's a big problem with video in general. With these type, what we're working on is how do you know that people aren't recording it now? Of course, there's lots of ways people could record it. So nothing's ever, and people could record something if they're in the room with you as well. So it's never really secure, but making it harder makes it less likely for people to leak. Next question.
Comes to us from Jonas Dattel in Reutlingen, Germany. Any recommendations on a Intel NUC that is good for Playout, searching for some systems to validate?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Wrong button, sorry. We use multiple NUCs all the way around from the i3s, i7s, one of the recent ones, but our little i5s probably have 4 or 5 of those fantastic boxes. Mm-hmm. You really can't go wrong. Just configure it with what you think the needs are.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I would also say make sure to go with Windows Pro on those because that will give you the most customization over minimizing your pop-ups and giving you the most control over your apps and your update settings and things that could just throw you off in a Playout type situation. You want the maximum control over your OS, I'd say.
Next question.
Richard Lavery in Belfast, UK, and here in the panel today has the next one. And he says, in our stream last night, our Clearcaster started dropping frames and disconnected. It had started dropping frames a little over the last few shows. Any suggestions on what could be causing it and how to diagnose issues? No obvious issues has he been able to find with the network at this point.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was actually going to say network would be the first place I would look and see if something changed in the network topology or an update on a firmware on a possible switch. The other thing would be heat. For sure, the Clearcaster is a computer. So beware that their heat buildup can affect processing. So you might look for a fan that is not working also inside. If it's out of warranty, open it up, clean it out. If it's not, if it's still under warranty, send it back. Simple as that.
Richard, did you restart it?
Yeah, I mean, heat-wise, it hasn't been giving us any heat warnings, and I've checked it. It was restarted as well. And this is the first time in the last couple of shows it's actually dropped frames. We've used it for quite a lot of shows in the last 6 months, and it hasn't shown any problems. It's only just recently started. Nothing's changed that we can find network-wise. Nothing's changed in the topology. No firmware updates that I can find so far.
Yeah, that's definitely a call the manufacturer if it's at this point, because it does sound like there's just something going sideways. Now, one thing to remember with RTMP streams, if it's doing an RTMP, is that it requires data back. So it's not just your out speed or latency. A high latency return for some reason will also cause an RTMP feed to fail. So it's also something to kind of keep in mind. It's not a dumb system where it sends it out and it just doesn't pay attention like a UDP. Next question.
Jonas Tatels back from Reutlingen in Germany with, I'm looking to hire a freelancer Swift developer. Anything you normally look out for when hiring freelancers or hiring in general?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So, you obviously want to make sure you figure out who it is you're working with, but I just have some comments on the sort of mechanics of it. If you're going down the freelancer route, you want to make sure that that relationship is clearly defined and you're staying away from any employer-employee type scenario, and that the intricacies of that will depend on your region or wherever you're conducting that relationship. Make sure the payment terms are clearly defined in terms of milestones and deliverables for both parties, and that any IP that's created, where that goes and whether that's exclusive. And you really want to look at kind of the quality of the work that's going to be delivered, because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where a freelancer is going to create something that only they know how to work with. If you have to bring in another freelancer after that, are they going to be able to pick up that work and work with it? And if you are sharing access to any of your systems, your login information, make sure you set up separate accounts for that and share passwords or confidential, stuff like that, so that you can close that stuff off when that relationship's complete.
Go ahead, Jason.
Beautiful answer. The only thing that I would add to that is, if you're not going to do the coding yourself, you want explicit guidelines for how things need to be commented and how they need to be organized. You don't need to know anything about coding in order to say everything must be defined. All those things that are defined need to be, and all of that needs to be mixed very nicely into payment terms, and signed using something very well-known, Adobe, DocuSign, whatever you want, so that if there's any issue, you immediately have, breach of contract. But yeah, really, you also, I guess the last thing is you want you want to look at what they've done in the past. You want to ask for little clips of their code and, take that, give it to somebody else and say, is this gibberish? Is this spaghetti code? Or, is this professional?
Go ahead, David.
Generally, I look for responsiveness. If I send a message and I don't hear back within 24 hours, then I'm not interested.
The company that we've worked with that I've worked with in the past the most is TopTal. And I don't try to find freelancers generally. Sometimes I do if it's within something I'm playing with, but when we're working in a company, TopTal is it's top talent, I think is what it's short for, but it is, you just tell them what you need and you find somebody in the world that does it. And they're usually, cross-checked and processed. It's a little bit more expensive than finding just a freelancer, and you're not going to get someone who will make any kind of creative contract with you. It's going to be this much per hour. But we've ended up with teams that are a mixture of Ireland and Bulgaria and, all kinds of things. And they've all worked really, really well together and produced very clean code. So it's, they just know how to do that. You also want to make sure that you don't really want someone moonlighting from a main company, because they might have contracts that say the company owns everything that they build while they're working for it. So you got to be careful of people who are moonlighting. Next question.
Comes from around Victor Cahillo in, it says Brookings, South Dakota, but he says Spruce, Dakota in his lower
Keep going.
third.
Let's go.
And he says, when building a failover network in a Unix network, I believe, do I need to build a new network as well as a second WAN, or will the current network settings work?
Go ahead, Rupert.
I'm going to assume we're talking about Unify and talking about failover WAN connections. So in that scenario, you will need a separate network configuration for your WAN connections. You want that to be able to, so that you can really communicate over both, and that the system can monitor them separately. And so that, because if you don't have that, you're going to end up with conflicts. They need to be distinct networks. So you'll have a WAN 1 network, for example, and a WAN 2, each with separate IP addresses on the WAN side. And that's it.
Go ahead, Jason.
Just as best practice, I will add what I added before Air. The easy way to compartmentalize this is with an Edge Router X. They're $50. It is an amazing, amazing interface. And yes, it takes a little bit of time to learn. It's not as pretty, but it will absolutely do failover without fail. And that's
Jason,
really
your audio is a little low. Jeff?
As someone has deployed many Unify machines, and we use like 20 ourselves, different USGs. I would suggest not, unless it's just, if you're really looking for failover and true failsafe, then look for another path, because the Unify platform is very slow on the switch over between WAN 1 and WAN 2 compared to, say, PipWave. But if you just want to have it just as there as backed up and just in case, and the timing to fail over is not as important, then if that's the case, then yes, you just basically have to assign it, like Rupert said, assign its own set of information in there, and you should have two WANs. I mean, like two WAN sources. Don't just try to do it two WANs off the same modem. That's irrelevant. It's still the same modem at that point. Or the same IP address from the same provider, or a separate IP address from the same provider. It's still the same provider. So make sure you have two providers.
Go ahead, Victor.
The clarification, thank you for that. I understood I had to have two WANs, but I do not have to have a separate LAN for that new failover network, correct?
By definition, that would not be failover. That would be, additional redundancy.
Redundancy. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Next question.
Rabbi David Pashkin is back with from Miami, Florida, with what are the most important tools or gear for part-time broadcasters, streamers, and Zoomers who want the best bang for their buck?
Ethernet cable, number one. Number one. What we oftentimes, we've said this, I've said this probably over and over and over again, but it's always worth repeating, is that when we look at bringing someone in to connect to them, we want to first focus on their internet, then on their audio, then on their lighting, then on their camera, then on their background. And so it doesn't seem like a lot of people pay attention to different things at different levels, but we have found that that's the most consistent if you do each one of those. I will always say that audio is the most important thing that you can do. Once you get the connection working, having good audio, people can listen to a lot of, people can watch a lot of bad video. They can't listen to bad audio for very long. You also want to think about the fact that a lot of people will be listening to your show as well as looking at it. And so really strong audio makes a huge difference in them being able to listen to it for a long period of time. And then after that, good cameras. Go ahead, Rupert.
If you're using Zoom on a free account, for example, then some way to bump your resolution, either through a portal, Facebook portal, or a Zoom room even. But so if you're just doing it sporadically, then on a free account, some way to get up there in resolution.
I mean, the other things that when I'm talking to anybody who's doing actual streaming and wants to get serious about it, an ATEM Mini, you can get. Eventually, you'll want the extreme. We always warn people that if you can afford to buy the extreme, you can just go ahead and buy it. But otherwise, you'll always use the other one as glue or something else as well. So it's fine to get the smaller one first. They're all great pieces, but it just gives you this little piece of hardware that just solves the problem, and you don't have to worry about what your computer can and can't do and what computer you're using. It just shows up as a webcam, and now you can switch cameras. And so it's another really, key item that makes a lot of the other. Now, once you go down that path, you're now in the ecosystem. So you start buying the cameras and you start buying the, everything else. But, and then the thing, if you get an extreme or above, you'll want Mix Effect Pro, which lets you do a lot with the super sources and graphics and so on and so forth that you can't do. It's the number one thing, the pain point for an extreme or above is that the super sources are really hard to use inside of the ATEM system. And it fixes that pretty quickly. Next question.
Comes from Andy Kokendorfer. Whoops, almost hit that. In Viera, Florida, I need a no or low cost method to record better interviews with new employees than Zoom and webcams. Unfortunate that Zoom mobile app does not allow local recording, but does the group have any suggestions?
Go ahead, Bill.
I'm just wondering, are you talking about remotely across the internet, or is it local? If you're recording people who are coming into your offices, the low-cost camcorders and people like Canon are really good. They have decent sound, and you can get a really sharp picture out of that. If it's for online and you're remotely, then things all change, and you're going to be more stuck.
Go ahead, Jason.
I'd say, yeah, even if it was over Zoom, a standalone recorder like an H6, they are inexpensive and would work relatively well. They're extremely flexible, and I don't know, maybe $400 or so.
Yeah, the hard part is being able to talk to them and then having it record video on the phone. I think that's the thing that I'm it would be really great to be able to have some kind of audio connection between that. I don't know whether you could run Zoom in the background and then use something like Filmic in the foreground, or a video camera in the foreground where they're just answering the questions to the video, but they're still able to hear you through a phone call, which I think might actually be possible. Go ahead, Chris.
I apologize. I had to step away. I may have missed this. Riverside FM has an iOS app.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, Riverside FM would be good. And which one? Yeah, we should get those guys on.
We really should. I would love to talk to them in depth. One of the biggest downsides of it, until you spend some money, is you really don't get to see the full framing of the shot until it's recorded. And the user interface has alternate levels of headroom depending on how you're looking at it. The enterprise version, which will cost you a few $100 a month, they have a button that says "Show me full frame," and it's like,
I see. That's all they get you. That's all they get you.
Well, there is another way on the non-enterprise version where you can like click a button and it will take a freeze frame from the other camera and put it in a tab on your browser. And
still
like,
there, but
just make sure there's no errant superheroes up in the corners that you have to paint out later.
Yeah, Jason.
I would say a quick and dirty would always be QuickTime. You can always screen capture. If it's iOS only, I'm kind of out of ideas.
If it's a remote, yeah. David?
Yeah, you can use, I don't know if this will capture audio, but you can use screen capture, iOS built-in screen recorder. You start your Zoom meeting, just pull down and click on screen recorder, and there is an option for microphone audio.
The problem with that is you're getting
all the interface around
screen. You're getting all the UI.
Yeah, the question really is does the audio get shared between a phone call and the camera, which I haven't ever tested. So, and the other one that could be a possibility that I just haven't tested for that is be Larix, which is the SRT backhaul. Could be something to play with as well. Next question.
Comes from Jonas Stuttel, Reutlingen, Germany, and Jonas says, "What's your favorite tool to debug a video system?"
Brute force. Go ahead, Jason.
I'd say the web presenter, the HD, and hopefully the 4K are both just awesome for that. It will completely decode, but yeah, it's only going to work at the end.
I don't like the web presenter as a video input for measurement because it compresses it already. So the video that comes into my system, I'd rather use a mini recorder for that because of the fact that it will come in as uncompressed. And then, so if I'm running into scopes like I don't know if it's Nobi or Nob scopes or Scopebox, those are the tools that I use definitely to look at video, but how it comes in is important. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure. Debug is not a term we normally would hear around looking at video signals. Waveform monitors, vector scopes, the regular tools from the video industry that are built into things like Scopebox and some of the NLEs actually usually will tell you everything you need to know about the picture itself. But I'm thinking you might be talking about something more about transport.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, the ultimate one to debug your system is SRI's. I can't think of the name of it right now, but SRI's interrogations video feeds are the standard. Like you pass it through, and basically what these are is visual video that you can push through your system, and it will tell you at any point whether it was converted to 8-bit, 10-bit, HDR, whatever it is. It will tell you that visually. You can literally look at a monitor and what happens in the monitor. You have a little code that you look down at. I spend probably half an hour with them every time I go to NEB or IBC, just talking about the images. But it just runs through a series of images that will let that, along with a Hitomi Matchbox, are probably the two most important things for really high profile events that we use, that will interrogate your entire system, because anything that happened, not just what your signal is at that moment, but what it ever was all the way through the system will be shown up by some of these systems. Go ahead, Rupert.
What about a video assist or a Atopos Ninja or even a Decimator, something like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some other ones that you can use that there are a couple different ways. On the far end, there's tools, Tektronix, of course, makes a variety of software and hardware. Fabrics. So Fabrics is a little handheld that we walk around with a lot of times, and they'll show us all kinds of signal data, that's there all the way down to the Fabrics will also, it's with a PH, will also tell you everything down to that. You can literally look at the SDI numbers as they're coming in and all the little bits and pieces. And so you can interrogate the signal with the Fabrics as well. And a lot of us will, during a show, will carry that around because you just plug it into things and you go, okay, this is what I'm getting. Go ahead, Jeff.
Just a side note, Sienna Processing, it has a great NDI analyzer module, and I live by it because it tells us audio, it tells us bit rate, it tells us frame size, every little bit of that. So if you're troubleshooting an NDI based workflow, very, very handy tool, but it comes at a cost, of course.
And there's another one that I can never keep in my head that I see some friends of mine use that I always want to call it Weather Report, which is a band, but it's another there is a little box that's a lot cheaper than a Fabrics that I always think Weather Report. And so obviously they didn't name it very well. And I'll try to find that and put it into Makana. All right, next question.
Chris Widener comes up next from Lafayette, Indiana, and says, a friend sponsored a group bike ride over the weekend and asked me if I could stream the next one, other than talking him out of it. In an area with spotty cellular coverage, what systems has everybody used to buffer and send out a stream like that?
Go ahead, Jeff.
If it's a bike ride, it's cellular. There's not many more options other than possible. I mean, we've used satellite before, but you're talking about a major and cost investment. Back in the KU, I believe it was the satellite we had on the Mini Cooper that we built for New Tech, and that KU bandwidth was like hundreds of dollars a day, not just month, a day. And right now, LiveU cellular, LU 800s like we use, or LU 600s, if you're just doing a single channel, that's just the way. Bonded cellular is like the way to do that, without a doubt.
Jeffrey?
First of all, thank you for putting Weather Report into my head. Secondly,
and by the way, it's not Weather Report. Here's why it gets stuck in my head that way. It's digital forecast. It's a weather report. Yeah. So the company is Digital Forecast is a and a lot of truck guys have digital forecast in a little box, and they open it up, and it does a lot of what the Fabrics does. It doesn't do everything the Fabrics does, but it's like 1/10 the cost. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So here's an alternative. If they're using their phones to doing the streaming, and they can get an app that does RTMP. Restream now has the ability to capture RTMP signals through their studio. You can set up a studio at wherever your base station and then have them RTMP in it. That way, if the signal gets lost, you just switch over to a signal lost or something like that. Or you could come on and talk about where they are, what they're doing. And then when the signal comes back, then you can bring it back that way. That would be probably the lowest cost method I would think of that you could do that.
Yeah, and the other thing is a lot of times cell signals are spotty, but not all cell signals are spotty. So one of the things that we've done a lot of is if we think we're going to have someone cover something with a cell phone, is we go out with a bunch of different providers and we figure out which one has the, Verizon works well here, AT&T works well there, T-Mobile never works that well anywhere, but but when it works amazingly well because no one else is using it. So anyway, so those are the other options. To get myself into a lot of trouble for saying that. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, Lyric's Broadcaster as an iPhone app, as well as SRT mini server, especially if you can run it up in the cloud. It has a beta system which allows you to sync. So if you're trying to get those bicyclists to where they're not looking like they're doing the same thing over again when you cut to a different shot, because some of the timing when you're doing RTMP feeds like that will be out of sync. So it's a good idea to try and find a solution that will sync up those sports moments so that they don't look like they're redoing the same thing. So that would be mine is, Lyrics.
Go ahead, David.
And maybe Speedify just to bond all those different cellular connections. No. Oh God. I just upset the
No. Go ahead, Rupert.
Speedify does not bond cellular. Sorry.
Go ahead, Rupert.
If you are using hotspots or something, just try and get a little bit of a better signal use some external antennas or use a hotspot that allows you to connect an additional antenna and just get that somewhere where you may get a bit of a better signal.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I'd agree with that on the extra antennas. We bought, it's like a $200 antenna to put on our trucks, our vans and bus and such. And getting those antennas outside of the metal Faraday cage is a huge advantage of getting a better cellular signal. Better modems also exist. So just the little hotspots like everybody called them forever, the MiFi or the new Netgear, the big one that they use is the Nighthawk. Some of those have external antennas, but if you buy something that's purpose built for industrial use, such as the PepWaves series or the ones we've been using for a while, I'm just slowly getting away from them, is the MoFi, MoFi. And that actually has a fantastic radio. It pulls in signals that even a cell phone won't get. So I highly recommend antennas external and better modems. And the thing about Speedify is a lot of people think that is a solution, but it doesn't time and bond cellular signals together. If you're bonding something, you have to be able to assemble it on the far side.
Right.
That's the difference in the cellular bonding.
The other thing to pay attention to is you'll get used to paying attention to where cell towers are. So I take pictures of cell towers because it takes, if I'm near one, because it takes my GPS. So if I have a picture of cell tower in my phone, I have a GPS of where that cell tower was. If you have to if your bike ride is wherever you're going to make it, it is what it is. But sometimes you can have things happen. Like I was in the middle of North Carolina and just driving through rural North Carolina a couple of months ago, and I looked up and I saw the cell tower and I did a test really quickly and took a picture of it, and it was like 150 up and down because I was right next to it, and it was in the middle of a game reserve. What went through my head is, if I ever need to do something in the middle of nowhere, this is going to be on the short list. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, one last thought. There are several iOS apps that have cell tower maps. Yep. And they work and they're accurate to some degree, but it's it's a good place to start.
Next question.
Vic Hernandez is up next from Springfield, Missouri. Obviously, I'm missing something. The links on Alex's daily email or the top of officehours.global will get me to the pre-show and the main show, but how do I get to after hours?
We'll put that back into the email. I think I took it out when I updated the email, or it might be hidden at the bottom. But if it's not, I'll put it back in for after hours. It's usually like some kind of nondescript thing at the very bottom of the email, but I had to update an email last week when we had issues. And so we'll get it back in there. Next question.
Mike Beardmore, Reading UK, says, what should attendees expect from Zoomtopia, given all the extra data they require for registration?
Rupert.
Sorry. I didn't have to, but I was offered to put in my mailing address to get some free swag. So we'll see if that arrives.
Virtual backgrounds. You're almost guaranteed that everyone's going to be in front of virtual backgrounds. Sorry, I can't watch them. I can't. I get like Zoomtopia doesn't even exist. You guys have to tell me if they covered anything good, because I can't watch it. I can't watch that anymore. Next question.
Dave Chalmers in Glasgow, Scotland, back again with Mac OS security question. Should you turn on the native macOS firewall in System Preferences, which is off by default, when in a shared or public network?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to answer your question with another question. Do you really want to go there? The easiest way to do it is to really just turn off your file sharing, turn off remote management. All of those are much more accessible. The other way to do it would be turn on the firewall and then punch a million holes through it.
Yeah, I would probably turn off. I generally keep all the sharing turned off for everything that I'm doing. Next question.
Dave Chalmers is back again with another one from Glasgow. With NDI 5 now supporting ARM CPUs natively, any word on higher performance RasPi NDI viewer apps?
I don't know if anybody's heard anything yet. It's still new. They're just getting started. All right, next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up. No.
Sorry, I was just going to mention, decaffeine is one.
Sorry.
Decaffeine is one that's out there that is probably the only one that's on Raspberry Pi, but I haven't seen anything new as far as a high performance. I know Jonas did buy that new developer GPU-based one, and he's running some tests too to see how sporty that thing can be.
So decaffeine?
Decaffeine is the only one that I know of that's RasPi NDI, and they just made it free, so it's completely free. No more $20 fee, which is kind of scary in some ways.
Yeah, it means
a developer giving away something for free.
When they used to charge for it, it means hopefully they're still around. Next question.
There goes Carmichael back again. This time he says, why has Ubiquiti networking equipment become popular in networking circles versus the major brands, Cisco, Juniper, and so forth? Would it be easier to find people that know how to work with the major brands? Wouldn't it be easier?
It's simple. Price point. Price point, and you get a tremendous bang for the buck. You get the tools in the top down. I call it the one glass view, as many people do, where you can see from the very top to the very bottom of your network, and you can see everything on it. It's what other people strive for. Instead of having to dive into every single little piece, every single device on your network by IP address, you get one pane of glass that you can see everything that's going on, and that's what the Meraki higher end stuff allows you to do. And then there's quite a few that are coming this route. They're definitely coming on fast. Netgear is actually one of them. Pepwave also is working on, has the Insight side of theirs is quite strong too, but price point is the biggest point.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Great answer, Jeff. I'll answer the last half of that question, which is just, if your networking people understand networking, none of that matters. You don't learn an interface, you learn a series of principles. And then after that, it's just a matter of implementation. And of course, both networking guys and everybody prefer an easy, pretty interface.
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, some of those, large, more well-established, or not legacy, but, the Cisco worlds and stuff, there's quite a high barrier to entry there. The Ubiquiti stuff, you can get in on the ground floor quite easily, and then they've got a great pathway to grow and scale, so you can that's why it's attractive as a pathway to grow.
I think there's kind of the independent owner versus infrastructure, two different views of how to do this. And the people that I've talked to in networking won't tell you that Ubiquiti is better than the other ones. It's just better for the price. And so, what they have at home and what they use, there are definitely large scale tools that they prefer from the Cisco side of things when they're dealing with a huge, company or a huge event over Ubiquiti, but they still, even at those events, might use Ubiquiti for parts of the edge, as opposed to some of the central stuff, which may still be Cisco. So it just depends on what they're doing for it. And Jeff, you have a very unsupported signal often. Figure that out. All right, next question.
About to kick it.
Okay.
Up next, we have Raziel from Boston. And Raziel asks, under what conditions does meetingmeters.com bump up the resolution of participant video? I'm unclear as how to confirm or benefit from this trick. This is for a paid account, which Zoom granted 1080p already for.
Now go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, so basically what Meeting Meters is it's basically a Zoom room that will send in a feed of meters. Right now, it's just in beta, so the meters aren't actually coming in. It's just a Photoshop document that just shows what the meters will look like. But what we found during these beta tests was people found this side effect that it'll bump your meeting to 720p, not 1080. If you've already got 1080p on your account, it's not going to do anything. But it sounds like you might not be fully enabled if you aren't getting HD resolution. So sometimes you got to do a double ask, even though they say that they flipped the switch in the back, they didn't flip the bit that actually gives you 1080p. And you got to watch how you're pulling the stream. You got to look and see that you're pulling the window full screen, and somebody on the other side, when you get like 2 or 3 people in the meeting, and see if the other side is actually pulling you 1080p or 720 in the stats. So you don't want to be in gallery view, otherwise it won't work. It'll just send 360 or 240.
And remember that the request for 1080p is from webinar and meetings are separate. So you need to get a Zoom to approve both of those individually. A 1080p doesn't mean that it's across the board. Next question.
Dave Chalmers up once again from Glasgow, Scotland. He says, I need to monitor audio for a live stream in the same room as a live event with a band, and so forth. Any suggestions on the best isolating headphones to use? Anyone tried the GK-Audio UltraPhones, Peltor ear defenders with Sony 7506 drivers?
I use in-ear monitors with airplane or shooting, headphones, but usually airplane comms. I don't use the actual headsets because they're not very high quality. but the cups on them and their ability to isolate is very high. And then I have in-ears go underneath and go in them. And I have found that to be fairly effective in very loud environments. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So what I would do is, if you have the ability, if you have a mixing board that can be controlled via iPad, that you get something wireless, and especially if you don't have to worry about the latency at times, and be able to walk out of the room so you can hear things and then walk back in as you go. If you can't do that, then of course this would be pointless, but that would be my suggestion.
Maybe for spot checking, but I'd be pretty scared of doing that during the show. Just not being able to hear it in real time. But next question.
Oh.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Jason Bates is up next from Albuquerque, New Mexico, with Blackmagic Design's announcement of studio camera supporting a 5-pin headset. Does anyone think there's a broadcast-worthy headset to be used by talent on camera in a pinch?
All right, go ahead, Jeff.
A lot of them. They're called Sennheisers. Sennheisers, we use the 300s. I believe it's HMD 300s now. Used to be the 280s. And then also the higher end, the 26s, 25s. Yeah, what guy's grabbing right now out of his magic bag.
Which one is that guy?
The HMD 26s. These are pretty much the standard. These are like the NBA headphones. They sound really good too, but they're expensive. They're like $450. So be prepared to spend. But they sound great, and they have these cool features on top where you can change the clasp, and you can also flip up the ear. So if you need to in the middle of a broadcast, you can flip up one side so you can hear what's going on in the room, and then flip it back down.
I found out Sheps makes them. Sheps makes actually a headset mic.
What?
Yeah. I'm just saying, it's $2,000. I just I sit there and I look at it every once in a while. I saw it when I was at IBC, and I was just like, oh my gosh, there's a headset. There's a broadcast headset with a Sheps.
Of course.
Right,
I was halfway through searching, and then you're like, it's $2,000. I'm like, of course it is.
I don't have the money yet. Next question. Can't hear you.
Douglas Carmichael says, with the use of boutique channel strips like a Rupert Need design Sheffield channel, and he's got the link there, along with high quality mic, make an audible difference for an office hours use case?
No, I don't think they would. I mean, maybe it would sound a little bit better. I think that I doubt that. I would love to hear it though. If someone has it, get a Neve preamp with a with a Sheps mic. Anyway, but the I don't think that you would hear a sizable difference over Zoom in that environment. Although in original audio with high fidelity, you might hear it a little bit. Would it make any difference? I don't know if it would be worth it. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
The only thing I would add to that is maybe, if you actually have a singer remotely, that kind of thing would be your only shot.
I'd love for someone to try it. I guess that's all I'd say is that no, it's another one of the things that's outside of my current budget. Next question.
Oh.
And for those of you, by the way, who raise your hand late, just know that after the first set of people, I move the questions back to the foreground, so I can't see the window. So I choose the people that are there. And raising your hand late, it means that I won't get to you because I don't even see anybody after I call the first people. Unless I come back to it, there's like a 90% chance that I've already put a window over top of all of you, and I'm looking at the next question. Next question. I can't hear you.
Tony Mobley, Newman, Georgia. That was pointed out to me. Noonan, Georgia. I am working on a small congregation that now wants to invest in a MacBook Air. Should they go ahead and get the current Air or wait for whatever is released in September, October from Apple?
Go ahead, David.
Whether you wait or not, definitely get the Pro for an extra $300. You'll get the fans, so you don't have to deal with overheating. And I wouldn't wait till September, October. I'm not sure that we're going to see the M1X chip released.
Go ahead, Jason.
It's always best to wait if you can. That said, I would say don't worry about the Pro. I would get a Mac Mini because they're just the greatest toys ever.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Especially, I don't know what you're using it for, but unless you're really going to go somewhere with it, the Mac Mini is a better solution. It is got way more I/O in the background, in the back. It'll have the same amount of power, but it's just way more extensible. I'm about to switch the machine that I'm talking to all of you on to a Mac Mini, from my iMac. but I'm just, I was going to upgrade and I was like, I don't I don't go out enough to need a MacBook Pro anymore. So, so the Mac Mini is something that I would highly recommend. Go ahead, Bill.
I'm looking at an Air for the voice booth only because I wanted the integration of a screen, a keyboard, and fanless, and that is the one use case where something like that fits perfectly.
And for me, I would want to have all that stuff in the booth, in the computer on the outside of the booth. So I would go with a Mac Mini. like unless I'm going to actually take it on a trip, I would never get another laptop. Laptops are for trips or going to the coffee shop. But if I'm going to have anything installed, I think I wouldn't have it. I wouldn't do that at this point, Jason.
One last point of order on that, barring the keyboard, the iMacs are also fanless and can be ordered as Visa mount.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, the problem is that the reason I've become so focused on it is Apple's extensibility on the laptops is so bad. There's so few USB-C connections, and there's so many on the Mac Mini that to me it's just a constant frustration of what am I going to plug into my computer, because I want to plug my audio and my video directly in without a hub. And when I start doing that, now I have very few connections left. And so I think the form over function that Apple took with the laptops has had me not want to use them unless I have to. Go ahead, David.
Agree 100% on the Mac Mini. When you do need that extension for ports, which you will, I would suggest the TS3, CalDigit TS3.
Yeah. Next question. Can't hear you.
Douglas Carmichael says Walter Palmer mentions that the off-air audio from his radio show sounds better after going through an Orban. Is that basically a multi-brand compressor and limiter? How can you simulate that processing with a plug-in chain for streaming?
Go ahead, Bill.
Orban's a company that made a lot of broadcast equipment for many years, and they are multi-processors. The way it's done now is with plugins in an environment. I use the Apollo Solo, but Universal Audio has hundreds and hundreds of analog classic equipment emulators and software that you plug in. So if you want the sound of an Orban, in fact, there's probably an Orban plugin that gives you all those controls in a more modern form factor.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is up next with, when you're using a separate hardware or software firewall, Juniper, SRX, Cisco, FreeBSD, OpenBSD kinds of things, would disabling the MacOS Firewall be safe?
Go ahead, Jason.
Again, I'll point you to sharing settings. You shouldn't be messing with your end unit firewalls.
If you're using it as a server for some reason, then firewalls make sense. If you're using it as a personal computer, we wouldn't normally do that. Next question.
Victor Cahillo here in the panel, Brookings, South Dakota, tried to order a B stock on the Herman Miller chair and it just never shipped. What office chairs, no arms, would you folks recommend? The budget is $500 to $700.
I got a Herman Miller. It took forever for it to come, but it was worth it when it showed up. Go ahead, Chris.
Where did you order from that it didn't ship?
Yeah. Did you order it from Herman Miller?
Victor's not here now.
Yeah. There's a lot of B stock of Herman Miller chairs in Amazon, and I would not do that, like, ever. Now go ahead, Bill, and then Jeffrey.
The other competitor to that is Steelcase. Steelcase has Leap chairs, which are pretty equivalent to the Herman Miller Aeron. They cost about the same. They're in the same kind of thing. So you're going to be spending normally $1,000 for a big one, but you can get armless office style chairs at that price range from Steelcase as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeffrey.
There's a lot of gaming chairs out there that are basically built to have gamers go on for hours and sitting down. It doesn't have that back air field, the open mesh field that you might want. And then of course, all office chairs mostly have the ability to take the arms off. So that's not a big deal. This is an office chair with arms, but I took them off. I hate them, arms myself. So
next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and he says, I was encouraged by the Blackmagic Design Web Presenter 4K. Do you think we'll see an ATEM Mini 4K?
Go ahead, Jason.
No.
I think we might.
Really?
we might see one. Yeah, I think we might see one. I don't know when, but I mean, 4K is coming and 8K is coming. So I think that I think 4K.
What if all the high-end ones
can never
went
say
all
never.
like 8K, and then they're like, yeah, 4K was
There's
yesterday.
already
We'll
one that's
just bump
8K.
that to the mini.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, especially with recording, because even if you want to stream at 1080p, you definitely want to record your ISOs and your overall in 4K. So I would see it coming in the next couple of years at least.
Next question.
Roberto in Santa Cruz, Bolivia is up next, and he says, I was encouraged by, any tips on what tool to use to best keep track of clients' preferences for future jobs?
Go ahead, Jason.
Google Forms. Google Forms will do this very, very well, and you plug it in with a spreadsheet and teach your staff how to use it, and there you have it.
Or Google Docs. I mean, keeping track of a lot of our stuff is all inside of Google Docs. For keeping track of every show and notes. I have to admit, most of my world all lives around Apple Notes. I'd love to say that was different. I have lots of folders in there, and folders that are different clients. I name everything. If I have a meeting with anybody, I have the client, the date, the subject as the very first line that shows up in bold, and then I do whatever I'm going to do, and it makes it. And the dates are just year, month, all 2 digits, year, month, day, so that they all sort. And I can find. I know I had a meeting with that person on that day or that range, and I can go find it relatively quickly. And I keep all of them there because I can find it anywhere. All my Apple products have notes everywhere, so I can find the notes quickly. Next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia is in next with, what are the panelists' thoughts on Dante AV? Already familiar with Dante Audio and DVF?
We're working on bringing some folks in to talk about that. Go ahead, Jeff.
It's still early, very early. And there's a lot of Dante audio out there, but video, there's like 3 that I've seen that have been products announced. It's really, really early. And the bit rate is very high in comparison to an NDI workflow. Not as high as like 2110, but it's still high for realistic using. And their pitching is being able to use it on everybody's network. I don't think it's going to happen. It's going to end up being like what was the AV1 or something that's just a very specific use case, installs, things like that are not production.
Next question.
Walt Palmer in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware says, I air a weekly radio show and use the raw audio from the console to feed a local video recording. More often than not, the off-air audio is better after going through the Orban than raw audio.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I think that's a follow-up to the last Orban thing. My guess is what's happening there is going to have something to do with the way that you're doing your video recording, some sort of impedance matching, some sort of like your audio inputs.
Well, it's just that one's processed and one isn't.
Well,
like,
yeah.
It's yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say you're running one through a processor and you're running the other one not. So there's going to be hopefully a difference. It's probably mostly compression. Orbans are very good at compression, and that's something that makes voiceovers and spoken word kind of more present in the mix of things. So that might be what you're hearing.
Yeah. And if I was recording something for the future, I would probably still want it to be raw, and then do the post-production. The ability to do post-production work on a raw audio is generally going to be higher than whatever the hardware is doing, because you have time. Next question.
Walt Palmer in Rehoboth Beach, again, Delaware. Is there a better way to sync the audio in Premiere than by trial and error? Off-air is on an 8-second delay.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I do a lot of syncing of audio, and you just have to get it right. It's like, yes, you have to work. Sometimes you actually have to work. It's just the way it works. Everybody wants a magic button. Please do my work job for me. Click.
If you can record it when you're not off air, because you have a raw, so you could be in a commercial break or something like that. If you just do something where you just go like this, and then you lean forward again. If you're off air when you're doing that, but the record is going in and you have video on you, that saves you a lot of time. you just kind of lean back into the mic and just go like this, and then just lean forward, and now you have a sync point. If you want to get official about it, you can actually you can bring a slate with you to work. All the kids will think you're weird, but it will work.
What's really interesting, Alex, is I heard you say on one of these shows months and months ago, maybe last year, you said something about well, I've done so much stuff without time code that it's really, I really don't,
Care.
I never learned to lean on it. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I've been doing this stuff since the mid 80s when like time code, what's a time code? I want
Well,
that,
When we do stuff in film where there's a ton of different pieces and they're all getting
course.
puzzled together and everything else, we're really glad when we have time coded. We're really specific about it. When you're having like lots of mics and lots of things and lots of scenes and lots of, there are reasons to have time code. On a day-to-day, we recorded 4 or 8 things and we had to time them together. It happens so quickly that you don't think about using any tools for that. Go ahead, Bill.
If you have audio and video time together, also just if you're forced to do it manually, look for P's and M's where the lips are closed and then they open up, and you can usually sync that sound to that lip movement if you've got a tight enough shot. That helps, but it's a pain in the butt to do it manually.
Next question.
Aaron Huslidge, or is it Douglas? It's Douglas. That's all right. That was up top. What would you recommend as a gaming class laptop to run virtual reality games along with Unreal Engine development? Would Razer be the first choice? It seems to be the most Apple-like of the PC laptops.
Go ahead, Jason.
I've had very good luck with very high-end Lenovo ThinkPads with an eGPU. You get an eGPU, things do kind of get better. I know it's a little bit iffy on 10, but that's the way that I tend to roll on the PC side.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Asus is doing a great job in this in their ROG. It's called the Republic of Gaming. They have laptops and desktops, and they run with AMD. They run with NVIDIA. You can customize, try to get Core i7 or i9 or better as you do this.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I would echo the same thing. Jeff was right down the path. We have like 10 of the ROGs, and they're phenomenal. They've been rock solid.
Yeah, I had a Razer that went to sleep one day and never woke up. And then when I went online, it turned out I wasn't the only one that had Razers that went to sleep and wouldn't wake up, and ever. And so I gave it to somebody I said, you can keep it if you can figure out how to get it to come back online. I asked 6 months later, it was still dead. So that's why I don't use Razers. Go ahead, Rupert.
That's maybe an example of why I would go to like the high-end Dell XPS and then load it up with the Dell support, and then you get like next day service on problems like that.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to change subjects just slightly early, but we came to the end of the first hour questions, and we've got plenty to talk about in the second hour. So we're talking a little bit about what we're planning for second hours. We're going to keep on evolving it to kind of give you a sense of what second hours look like right now. Is that Mondays and Fridays are wild cards. This is how I don't know if most people know how I think about them. Like you guys might think about them in a completely different way, but I think about them as Mondays and Fridays are wild cards. Tuesdays are audio focused. Wednesdays are video focused. Thursdays right now are kind of event focused or talent focused. And then Saturday, of course, is both education focused and then the long day where we just put lots of labs and other things into. And Sunday is just like whatever we want to talk about. And so that's how I've approached it up till now. One of the things for folks to let us know whether they like or not, and this can be kind of a discussion in the second hour if you want to, in the second hour suggestion inside of Discord. I'm looking at Mondays possibly being a breakdown day where we take somebody's project or what someone's doing, show some behind the scenes, talk about what's working, what's not working. I mean, I have enough of those that I can do that for a while if you guys don't post anything. but I know Hasmukh and I have talking about the Metal Conference, and I think other people here have done stuff where they can talk about how they're doing a production or how they've done a production. So Mondays I've been kind of leaning towards that. Not sure yet. And then I'm also trying to subdivide each of those days, so audio being some of the things that I think would be useful around, like I think we have a growing interest in modular synth. So like once a month, we're going to talk about modular synth. Once a month, we might talk about spatial, because spatial audio is about to become a really big thing. And so part of those might be staying ahead of that. And then the question is whether we keep general question for some of them, where we just open it up to general questions. So those are kind of the things I've been kind of thinking through. but people can let us know in the comments or in the and also in the questions what they think. Let's go ahead and jump to the first comment or question.
Okay, well, the first one actually is a comment. It's from Aaron Husledge in Durham, North Carolina, who's here on the panel. And he said he'd be happy to work on an intro to the networking second hour.
Yes. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I'm happy to contribute to that one too.
Yeah. And one thing to know is that one of the reasons I wanted to kind of have us have this discussion is during August, I'm going to be in the process of handing this off so that we have some people that already showed interest in helping with second hours a year ago that I haven't really done much follow up with. And so we're going to kind of turn that on where I'm going to hand a lot of this off. So part of it's us thinking about it in general. And then I'm going to start handing off to all of you to figure out what you want to do and how you want to do it. And I think that what we're going to end up with is much better second hours as we have a team that's starting to focus on those things. Next comment or question.
TJ Asher is up next, and TJ says there was a second hour group set up in Discord last fall to help coordinate second hours and second hour guests. Will that group be used at all?
Yeah, I'm going to come back to that group first to see who wants to play. I have to admit that there was some point where I said, hey, is everyone here? And almost nobody responded. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to rethink how to do this. So it was like a moment in time that I looked at that, and everyone was super excited. And then I didn't give people enough energy at first. And then I think it got lost in the shuffle. So the folks that signed up for it a year ago will be the first folks that I reach out to work on the next part of it. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
I was actually thinking of a different part of Discord with the second hour. And I'll just say that really quick. The one thing I had a problem with the second hour ideas, which is where I thought this was going, was that Discord was a little bit, you can get lost in the shuffle. So I was thinking if we had like a Makana type situation where people could enter in their second hour ideas that could be categorized and voted up and down, then that might help in figuring out what second hours.
What I will say is that voting on second hours in the second hour discussion is hugely influential. Just so you know, like when I'm looking at stuff and I see 5 or 6 or 7 votes up, I'm really trying to figure out what the best way is to put it in. When I see no votes or 1 vote, I go, okay, well, we'll see. We'll get around to that. And it's only if something's easy for me to get to. So your
when
thumbs
you
up,
say voting, the thumbs up, yeah.
The thumbs up is means something to me. It means that there's some interest in that thing. So as I'm looking through that, and again, we'll get teams that can absorb some of that. Then to your point, Jeffrey, we're going to have somewhere that people can vote on ideas and so on and so forth. And the big thing is we'll start planning pretty far out in advance what we're gonna do. Next question.
John Barker in Malmo, Sweden is up next. And he says, if you scroll back to a random point in the second hour ideas channel, there are lots of high voted topics that didn't happen. When is it too soon to re-add those ideas?
After a couple of weeks. If it hasn't gone, I'd bring it up. And one of the things about it is, this will get better as we get more people organized around it. Sometimes it's that I think that it's a great idea and I need to figure out who is going to say it, who's going to run it. Like if there's a second hour suggestion and I don't have the core skill that I feel like I could carry a second hour, then a second hour means I have to find somebody to do it. So that's also, part of the challenge is, okay, that's a great one. Like people will say, well, I really want to have, James Burke. That was a very highly voted one. We'd really like to have James Burke on, and I'm working on it. Like I've been pinging people and trying to figure it out, but I can't just put him into Wednesday, And so there is that challenge too. So there's some of them that are highly rated, but I also don't want to, throw it out there. We've had somewhere I threw it out there and we weren't really ready for it. And so we need to make sure that, like, for instance, on a certain kinds of audio questions, like when we talked about, I think orchestra recording, I actually pinged everybody to make sure that people who do orchestra recording were going to be there that day. So that's part of the challenge is making sure that we can coordinate with everybody who's going to be there. And like the AWS ones, I'll be pinging Guy and Jeff and other folks about, hey, we're going to do an AWS. Are you guys going to be around? Like I don't want to just put it up there and because so that's another piece of the puzzle that sometimes doesn't totally get tied in. And that's, again, as we put a team together, and why I wanted to have this conversation is to give the teams guidance as we have it fresh in our head as we go forward and have teams start to work on it. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, because like on the AWS one, we really brainstormed. We got together in a small meeting and we rehearsed. I mean, we went over and we said, nah, that's not going to work. No, that's going down the rabbit hole. Like Tucker really wanted to dive deep in firewalls. And we're like, no, Tucker, get out of the firewall hole. Because he wanted to explain it all. And we're like, dude, this is only an hour show. You're going to take up an hour just on firewalls and the eyes are going to glaze over on people if you go down that.
And my goal is that we have those kinds of discussions. As we change the video quality, and as we change the process, that the kind of discussions that you're talking about there happen for every single show. Like every second hour show is something that people have hashed out and thought about and talked through. And, that's won't happen immediately. Sometimes it's just like, and we're going to do this. But I think that what we want to get to is a point where we have a team that's on the back end that's kind of paying attention to those things. So yeah, absolutely. And that's why those hours were so good or have been so good. Next question.
Rupert McCrae up next from Dallas, Texas. And Rupert says, should a day or two a week intentionally be left open to accommodate last minute or spontaneous subjects and opportunities?
That has been specifically why Mondays and Fridays have been wild cards, was that I could put anything into them. Because I try not to put like audio. I try to make sure it's audio driven every Tuesday and video driven every Wednesday. And then Thursday, I try to think about it being talent or event. And then the other 2 days, so at least one of those days, I don't think should be scheduled ever until, right before and possibly I've been thinking about Friday being not scheduled until Monday. Like it's like when we put it out, Friday is filled in to be what it is. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
We could also do that in after hours easily, where we could have a spontaneous subject and then create a room where people can go into and talk about things.
Which we do now. we just, it's not even going to a room. Everyone just talks about things. So we do have a spontaneous way to manage a lot of things, which is after hours. But I do think that leaving a day that isn't scheduled is useful. Next question.
Aaron Husledge, Durham, North Carolina. Again, an intro to logic is his suggestion.
Yeah. So an intro to logic is most likely something, intros to applications will most likely be a Saturday kind of thing as opposed to a weekly kind of thing, which is more of a round, because they don't really lead themselves. One of the things I've been thinking about, other than bringing guests in, when we talk about an app itself, so if we bring a guest in talking about themselves or talking about their product, that's one thing. But when we do an app, the way I kind of lean towards that now is that it kind of excludes the rest of the panel. And so, and we're just kind of like almost nobody knows how to do it except for one person talking about it. And so I do want to do more of those. And I think that after hours is one place to do those. And also I'm leaning towards doing those on the Saturdays. So intro to logic is something I'm highly interested in. And again, I'm interested in getting people's head around logic and then getting their head around and look at Fairlight as well. And then talk about spatial audio. I think that's going to be a big deal. I think a lot of us really, if we're not thinking about it, we should be. It's like, because this would be like, hey, we've all been living in mono. There's this thing called stereo, man. And it's really going to be cool. It's going to take over. And it did. And so the difference between spatial audio and stereo is 10 times the difference between stereo and mono. So the spatial audio is going to take over. And it's important for us as media folks to get our head around it, to understand how to develop for it, to understand how to put it into what we're doing so that we can get to a point where it's every day. That's why we're probably going to spend at least one Tuesday a month soon, talking about spatial audio. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana says, I've done vehicle streaming quite a bit with iPads, iPhones. Could we have a lab doing this as a hardware-based process instead?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that does a lab, but when we say lab, I'm definitely going to lean more towards the after hours than office hours, and I think that because it's just slower content, and we want to have the time to do it. I still look at, and I'm just letting you know how I look at it, and people can argue with me about it. I'm fine with that, but I look at after office hours, second hour, still being kind of a boom, 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 boom with questions and maybe some performance if we have an artist, but still lots of questions. Like even when we bring artists on, what we've done is have them play a song or two, or maybe three, and then mostly have it be Q&A. So the idea is to make it very interactive. After hours, things kind of slow down a little bit. and we can do more lab-like things. And I think that's a perfect place for that. Next question.
Comes from Rupert McRae in Dallas, Texas. And Rupert says, when are 2-hour general Q&A sessions appropriate? If sometimes second-hour plans fall through, could there be a list of standby second-hour topics?
Yeah. I mean, we could definitely have standby topics. And again, it's mostly for other people to, I mean, once we get this into Teams, people can figure out what we're going to put into it. Part of this is also getting out of the Zoom, the email that you get every day, and getting into, something that we can looks nicer and we have a little bit more control over. So that's coming too this month. So we'll be moving more towards SurveyMonkey, or not SurveyMonkey. What is it? MailChimp. A bunch of a primate that's connected to a service. Anyway, so I think so we're going to definitely go down that path of having that. I don't think that having a second 2 hours is necessarily a bad thing here and there. What's interesting is that our average view time and the interaction rate is much higher when we have a second hour, when we just do a second hour general Q&A, than it is when we do a second hour. But the second hour draws a different group of people, so the power of like the second hour of Tuesdays being audio is that the first hour has audio specialists that can answer questions. And so there's this symbiotic relationship between the two that we're trying to kind of keep moving forward. Next question.
Aaron Husledge is back from Durham, North Carolina, with Andrew Cross from NDI. So it looks like a recommendation for a second hour.
Yes, that would be great. So we're working on that. Next question.
Rupert McRae back again. Should second hours always involve an introductory discussion, even if there are questions stacked up?
It depends on what we're doing. A lot of times I give people a little time to state their case before we open up to questions. It's mostly to cover the basics for the viewer. So the folks that are not asking questions, what happens is we've had issues where there's like 15 questions and they're all over the place by people who already know who that person is or what that is about. And there's a couple of second hours we walked away from that we never really had a solid sense of what they did, because the questions drove it off the rails so fast, because there's a handful of people that really knew what that was and just took it off. So what I've backed into is the idea of, giving, in my schedule in my head when I'm doing the second hours is that we have a minimum of 5 minutes and a maximum of 15 minutes that is kind of an introductory, and 10 minutes is kind of the target to just kind of get the basic of what do you do and where did it come from and how did it, and it also gives our guest, when we have a guest, it gives them a moment to acclimate and, kind of get used to where they're at before we start peppering them with questions. And when I set them up for the conversation, I also, set them up for, hey, you're going to get 5 or 10 minutes to talk about your thing. And then it's going to open up to the questions. One of the other things that I've been managing expectations, and I haven't been trying to stretch it, I don't feel comfortable saying, hey, we don't have any more questions when we have a guest. So the result has been, is I manage the guest's expectation by saying, this will last somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes, and so it'll end after 60 minutes, but it could be as short as 30 minutes rather than stretching it out. Now, some of that has to do with the producers. I mean, people just asking questions, if we run out of questions, I will say it during the first hour, but when we have a guest, I will not say that we're running out of questions. For the second hour, I will let it run dry and then just move on to the after show, to the after hours. And so people have to kind of keep their eye on it. Just because I feel like it just puts them in an odd position, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it was a bad, half hour. Some people are just really concise in answering a lot of questions. We've had a couple where it ran short, but they answered an enormous number of questions really succinctly, so I just don't want to create the expectation. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Do you want somebody like myself or Chad to go into the chats and say, ask more questions, or
Nope.
do you want to leave it at that too?
Second hour is up to the producers. The producers need to do what they're going to do. And so I don't want to have it anywhere like that process. We just let it take the path that it's going to take. Go ahead, Rupert.
I think that when that scenario happened within the last couple of weeks, there was a time where maybe we thought it was being cut short because there was a behind the scenes scheduling reason that needed to happen. So how can we know whether that's something that's just being naturally allowed to happen or whether there's some production reason for it to happen?
We'll never cut it short by more than 5 minutes. So if you're running low, if I'm running out of questions, I will just close it up. And so, and the one thing that I did find I was about to close it up and then someone started asking more questions. And so if you see only 1 or 2 questions to go, when I ask the last question and I say, this is the last question, I'm now locking the questions closed. And the reason I'm doing that is so I don't end up with that, you said goodbye and then you didn't leave moment, like I hate that. So like when someone says goodbye, it's time to go. And so it's important for the hosts or for our producers to be watching and, keeping that pool filling up, or not, but I'm not going to try to coax it out of everybody. Next question.
Just because it's A. Mitchell's and he's asked so many great questions over the years, I'm going to accept this one, which says how. And I would say, why didn't you ask why?
Yeah, exactly.
That's all he asked.
I don't know what that means. All right. How? Well, I guess we just start making some up. Here, let me tell you how we do office hours. Go ahead, Guy.
I think he's stating House of Worship, which is what that short form. We've had a couple spin-off shows with Leo, and there's a couple.
I knew there's a
few of us that do streams on the weekends, and so it would be cool to break down some of those for sure, or how their shows are done, especially with Marty's show. He's doing a great job with it, but pulling in some of that would be amazing.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I've kind of felt like staying out of Marty and Leo's lane there. I feel like they're doing that really well, and I'd rather push people towards that. It's one of those things, like one of the things we've paid a lot of attention to is making sure that this is a safe place for anybody with any kind of background to be part of it. Putting it into the second hour, it's one of those things that we definitely answer questions about House of Worship, during the show. And I'm excited that we're able to support people that are doing that. I think it's really important. Doing it for a whole hour, I'm not sure is the right place for a second hour for us. But because Leo and Marty are doing it so well, I'd rather have people going to their space and doing that. And I'm happy to talk about it. And if they remind me, I'll remind everybody on Thursday, hey, this is happening in the evening by some of our members. And I think that we should all go to it. I'm not sure. I think that it could create some turbulence if we did it during here for a whole second hour. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So besides House of Worship, politics, and anything that's completely explicit, are there any other subjects that we should kind of stay away from for second hours?
I don't know if muscle cars is really a thing for our community yet.
Can we live stream from them? In which case we'll consider
if we're live streaming from them, then they're completely, it's fine.
Because convertibles versus hard tops.
I think those are some of the major ones that we want to stay away from. And when we say completely explicit, I mean any explicit. As you know, I'm pretty touchy about that. So I think that those are the big ones that we want to. And we've had, and admittedly we've brought in some second hour guests that were from the political background, which I thought would be okay. And then at the end, I was kind of like, I probably shouldn't have done that. So I probably wouldn't. I just feel like it creates and even, one of the things I've been a little careful after a couple of them is bringing journalists in, because journalists have very political views that sometimes get expressed, during the thing. And I think I could feel the energy going 2 different directions, just by some of the comments. And so I think that, journalism is something that I'll look a little carefully at, from talking to journalists about their trade is something that I'm not as sure I would put into the second hour after some of the experiences we've already had. Go ahead, Jason.
I mean, there are, of course, exceptions to that. For example, I think Andy Anatko is very good at, he'll argue a point, but he'll also just, say this is journalism.
And I would not, online journalism and traditional journalism to me are 2 different things. So like Andy and Amber and Renee and Leo have all been amazing. guests. And so I just, just something that I just, all the guests have been great. It's been a couple comments where I was like, "Ooh, I don't know if I need to do that." And I think the people on the internet journalists tend to be actually more sensitive to it than traditional journalists, who kind of approach their view as the truth. Next question.
Rupert McCrae back in again. Should second hour suggestions in Discord be flagged as complete once they're covered in the main show?
It would be great. I mean, we need to have some way that we can organize things. The second hour list is a little bit cobbled together. So once we get a team together, I think that we can start to put it out. And I think what we need to do is have a team working on it and proposing, I think we should be finding a better way to have more discussions about the second hours and to really tune them up and let people know what they are weeks in advance rather than this morning and sometimes one day in advance. Next question.
Is actually for you, Alex. And it's somebody said, I'd like to see a second hour with Alex L as the guest, or perhaps someone else could host and find out more about Alex. That's our highest rated question for the after show.
Well, we can see. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
We already did that Saturday.
What did we do on Saturday?
Emily took over. Emily took over as host, and then you were a panelist.
Right, and we're gonna be doing more of that. But I think what they want me is to me.
They want somebody to interview Alex about Alex's career.
Yeah, go ahead,
as a second hour. Oh, okay.
Right, Alex is a second hour guest.
I'm sure I'm not the only one who would be delighted to interview you. I'm not sure how much interest there is in that, but if there is, I mean, those who have been watching Office Hours probably know a fair bit about your background. That said, I don't know, not a bad idea.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. You guys will have to put that in the second hours, and it has to be voted up really high for me to be willing to do that. So that's I'm just letting you know it's going to have to be like the most voted on ever before I'll actually do it. All right, next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and it says, what would you think of having Drew Thornton, Billie Eilish's front of house engineer, on? He has an excellent video series called The Sum of Two Buses.
So this is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. Is absolutely, do we want him on? We just need someone who has a contact. So if you can, if Drew Thornton wants to come on the show, we will make room for him to come on and talk about it. It's just a matter of finding someone able to talk to him and have him come on. I mean, many, like Greg Kurta is a good example. Mickey brought Greg on, and then Greg just liked hanging out with us and became, but I didn't have any way of getting a hold of Greg. And Greg brought somebody else on from somewhere I don't think I can talk about. And we've had some great hosts, or guests, from people who knew somebody here. So more of that, please. Next question.
Alan Scott in New Brunswick, Canada is up next. He says, should there be a way to enter questions in advance and link them to an upcoming second hour?
Yeah, we're working on that. What we want to be able to do eventually is have the schedule of second hours up there and out for everybody, and then have people able to start asking questions the moment they're scheduled. Like just throw them up and vote on them and everything else. The fact that it's happening in a week or two or whatever, and eventually what you really want is to be able to have people discuss the subject matter all the way up. And, if we schedule something 2 weeks from now, you could have a thread of us talking about it all the way up until we actually talked about it here. And it would be the culmination of all those conversations. So that's a little further down the road, but that's the thought process that I have around it. Next question.
John Barker in Malmö, Sweden wonders, how do we decide when a second hour should become a lab or the other way around?
Go, Jason.
If I were to guess, I would say it really has to do with, does everybody have the right equipment to do it? And is there, major benefit, like the Playout one, where everybody had a Raspberry Pi? That was just perfect.
Well, and one leads to the other one too. The Playout B is a good example, where Jonas came on and showed us what Playout B did. We asked him a lot of questions, and then we were like, let's build it. And then it became a lab. So I think that I think that kind of process is really nice, where we have a second hour about something, and then we decide that it's enough to bring a lab. And like to go back to logic, it might be good to bring some folks on that are really heavy logic folks and talk about their process and break it down, but it's not like a lab, like an intro to logic, but really like this is how they produce in logic, and answering a bunch of questions and everything else. And then we say, oh, in 2 weeks, we're going to actually do that, or something like that. And I would say Fairlight, except that I don't know anybody making music in Fairlight. It's capable of it. I just don't know any anyone doing it. So they're having I think they're having trouble penetrating that market because it's about 80%. Well, I don't know, 60 to 80% Pro Tools and 20 to 30% Logic, and then 5 or 10% of everything else.
It's all about mastering. I feel like
I talked to
really
someone. I talked to someone who was doing some great stuff that I was really excited about, and then I asked what they did, and then it was like Nuendo, which is super powerful. Like I was like, oh, that would be, and so having someone on talking about Nuendo is a good one. Doing a lab with it, I don't know if I would, because I don't know if there'd be enough people that would have it. So that's that's a good example of love to have someone show you Nuendo. Not sure if people would actually be using it enough to take it on. Next question.
Mitchell's in Washington says, once again, teachers may be faced with learning the practical issues with running a virtual class, for example, audio, video, Zoom, and so forth, with minimal support and time. Would it make sense to temporarily return the office hours EDU day to just streamed practical topics?
Maybe at some point, if things really shut down, we may open up extra hours or something else that we just really deal with the nitty gritty. I think that the problem is that, man, that education hour right now, I find to be one of the most interesting that we have. The second hour, as it's evolved, especially after we turned off the streaming, has really turned into an incredible conversation about education. And I'm very hesitant to stir that very much. In that area. So I think that if we actually see shutdowns for Delta, which could happen, we're probably going to open up another hour that is very practical and it's just for educators, and it's a place that they can go. And of course, they can always go to after hours to be supported, but we'll probably just open up, and we may do it where we have the more philosophical discussion as the 9 to 10 kind of thing, and a more practical one. First hour, second hour might be 8 to 9. So we may start to subdivide that. That way we can leave it streaming until 9 and then turn it off and talk more about nuts and bolts. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So yeah, after hours, good idea. But also on Saturday, if you have questions about education, you don't want it to be in that second hour. All you have to do is put it in the first hour. And if there's educators there on the panel, they should be able to help answer that.
It was a discussion we had last Saturday, which is that you could ask technical questions about how to do something as a teacher any day of the week, and it'll get recorded. So it'll be recorded, and we'll talk about it in detail, as much detail as we would talk about it on Saturday. Go ahead, Rupert.
Also, after hours could be and can act as a pretty good radar for those educators. If we see them popping in during the week, and we can raise that and say, hey, look, there is this need coming up. Maybe we do want to do something else on a Saturday.
And again, a reminder for everyone watching is that in the first hour, you can ask any question you want around things that you're trying to figure out. So that's why we've not pushed EDU to be too much one thing or another. It's just and it became philosophical because that's what people are asking questions about. Like if you ask a question about how do I do it in Keynote, we immediately shift gears and just answer that question. So it's the questions the show is being driven by the viewers. Go ahead, Rupert.
I was just thinking, if there are educators listening and wanting to put in questions at any time, just build some context around your question. Say, hey, in my classroom, or I'm a teacher, or I'm trying to work out how to do this. If you add some context, then people will see that and vote that question up and give you an answer that's suited to the education subject.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question
comes from Guy Cochran in the panel. In grade school, we had Friday Share Day. What could be a fun equivalent here?
That's what I was thinking about for either Friday or Monday. I was leaning towards is kind of that share a project, and here's a bunch of photos from that project, and here's what it took for us to do it, and this is and just a little like show and tell for one person, and then I do think that because there's a lot of us that have done a lot of great projects. So I think that I think we could do that every Monday without any trouble at all. Or it doesn't have to be a project we did. It's a project we're working on if we're willing to talk about it. I'd love to have Richard give us a tour of, the production that he's doing and how he's putting it together and the kind of things that they're doing, the challenges and everything else. That'd be a great example of one that would be really fun. That's still in action and hopefully something that we're hoping to get more people involved in. And so it could be really interesting. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, and in building that, I'd say, also if nobody has any major projects, just simply a show and tell, like, here's a piece of gear, like, here it is on camera, here's what it does, and here's why I think it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it last week, or maybe over the weekend. I can't remember when I was thinking about it. But to your point, I was thinking it would be fun to have, in Mac Break, we have picks of the week. It could be fun to have a picks of the week or maybe picks of the month, like just once a month on a Friday or whatever. We just have from the panelists, or even suggested from folks that are the producers that are putting stuff in, of like, here are some products that we really like, like that, just things that we've run across that we think people should know about. Next question.
Next question comes to us from John Baker in Malmö, Sweden. Would it be worth changing the name of second hour to accommodate the fact that it should last as long as it lasts?
Go ahead, Jason.
Gotta sanitize your inputs. It's still a second hour, even if it doesn't last until the top of the next one.
Well, I think what he's talking about is it might last longer too. We've had ones where we let them run a little over. And I think that as we grow, we'll be able to let it be more flexible. There could eventually be third, fourth, fifth hours, which is why we have to be kind of careful of letting things drag on. But I will say that I admit that a lot of limitations for the second hour to the absolute length is connected to the fact that I have to go to work.
Call them extra hours. I don't know.
Well, what I've done is that I do tell guests who come on that, hey, there's this thing called after hours, and if you want to come on, you can, but I really don't want to have them feel like they need to. And I also, one of the reasons we try to limit it to 1 hour is because we've told a guest that this is going to be an hour long, and they have other things too. They have meetings and other things. And so one of the big things that I'm always concerned about is overstepping our welcome, and we are really oftentimes very, very fortunate to have those guests, join us. And I don't want it to just drag on. And because for them, they just have to be nice. They're in front of hundreds of people. And for us to keep dragging the question on and so on and so forth. Now, there have been a couple that we've dragged on, and I can guarantee you that I had that conversation. I looked at it and said, I think a lot of people are going to be interested in this. Do you have time to go longer if people, like, for instance, Isadora, I talked to Mark about it beforehand, like this may go over. And I scheduled my schedule around it and warned him that it may go over. And so there's a lot of logistics to going over the top of the hour that affect a lot of different people. Next question.
Comes to us from Jonas Stuttel, our friend in Reutlingen, Germany. And Jonas says, just has a second hour suggestion: developing for or in the Blackmagic design ecosystem.
Please put that into the second hour and vote it up, and we'll even see if we can get. There's some folks at Blackmagic can be really fun to if we can get them to come in. I don't know whether they're allowed to talk in public or not, but we'll see what we can do. And I think we have enough people here that are pinging it that we could definitely organize. This gets back into where I need a team to help me, where go out and find the folks that are in our group that are doing this and make sure that that we have them coordinated for that day. But I would love to talk more about that. Next question.
John Barker in Malmö, Sweden up next. Is it worth cleaning out any chatter in the second hour ideas channel just to keep it readable?
I think it's fine. I mean, I like the fact that there's a discussion about it. I do think a tag of new idea or idea, like pound idea or something like that, so that we can search for the ideas as opposed to the thing. But usually scanning back. And again, this is, as we get a team, I think this will get much more organized much quicker. And so I wouldn't worry about it structuring it too much yet. Next question.
James Babbitt here in San Diego is wondering, would a search engine find the contents of a second hour show by using the tags that Jeffrey has been so patiently adding?
The second hour is admittedly less searchable because we run out of text. We run out of words. So I think that the title of the second hour is in the title of all of our shows. So that's really what drives the title of the show. It's focus on, and it's there. And Jeffrey has kind of organized that so people can search for that thing. Searching for all those questions are not available yet. And it is definitely on the roadmap to making everything searchable and everything findable and everything else. And it's just going to take time. Next question.
Laura Thompson, our friend in Texas, says, is there still an interest in a second hour on accessibility and inclusion? It had gotten high votes back in May.
Just a matter of you and I coordinating, Laura. So let's coordinate that and get that in soon. Absolutely. Next question.
Tony Mobley's up next. Our friend, how about Alex being interviewed on CWTM or Tony Mobley interviewing in the second hour?
I think I would rather do it on Tony's show than to do it here. So Tony, reach out to me and we'll talk about what day makes sense. I'd rather do it on your show and rather than my show. So so let's take a look at that. Next question.
Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany is up with second hour suggestion, Curtis Judd for audio and audio processing.
Yeah, and I think he's in our community somewhere. I mean, I've seen him come by, so I think that it's just a matter of reaching out to him, but love to have Curtis Judd in. Absolutely. Next question.
Aaron Huslage again, Durham, North Carolina, a show where all the panelists come in from a different location than normal, with the second hour being a discussion of the experience.
Go ahead, Rupert.
I had been drafting a question very similar to this, and I'm thinking we could call it like out of office hours and do some kind of mobile setup showcase thing.
Even in another room, like I realized that I could probably take my mobile unit and just go somewhere else in my house, and we could jump into it just to like, this is what we take on the road, which might be an interesting one.
Yeah, I'd totally do that.
Yeah. We did have one that I think that never turned out, or we didn't do it, where it was a challenge to do office hours with a kit that was less than $1,000 or something, because most of the panelists kit
less than
more
a
than
Pelican
$1,000.
case. That's the better way to do it.
Yeah, but it was so anyway. So I think that was one of the challenges that had spun out. My sensitivity to it is there's a lot of viewers in the first hour that'd be like, "Why is the audio so bad?" So that was the concern I had. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas again. Should the Saturday show not be named Focus on Education on YouTube when the education second hour is in fact not streamed?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
So I've been keeping it focused on education because one, it still happens. It just is not on YouTube. But two, it could easily come back at any time. So we still want to tell people that there's an education hour and go from there. Unless, Alex, you want to change that.
I think maybe we call it Saturday session for now. But let's think about it. I got to think.
I just don't want to deter anybody from coming for
let's keep it at education hour, because I think that I'm thinking more through it where we may encourage people to ask more education style technical questions for the first hour of the second hour, and so let's think through that. Yeah. Next question.
Rupert McRae is up next, and he asks, could a second hour suggestions that don't make the main show be taken to after hours for discussion?
Yeah. After hours discussion is whatever people talk about. So you could definitely, in fact, I can, like my interest in modular synth as a second hour is mostly driven from the fact that there's tons of stuff in the after hours that has been wrapped around modular synth. And so I kind of feel like we have enough expertise and interest in it that is worth doing. So I think that there's a lot of things that I would highly recommend with any of these things, not to wait until the second hour to talk about it in after hours. Go ahead, Bill.
The other day, though, Alex, we had extra questions left over, and you sent them back to the people saying, bring them up tomorrow. And I thought that was kind of interesting. That means there's another chance for a question that you hadn't gotten an answer to. So when would the split take place? When will they be after hours eligible as opposed to recycled into the next show eligible?
Well, I think that when people ask them in the first show, I think it's a good question. I think that when people ask them in the first hour or second, or it's mostly the first hour that I kick them back, it's that their first hour questions, and they may want them on YouTube so that they can refer back to them, because we do have people who ask questions early and then don't listen to the show in real time and then watch it later. So the idea, what we wanted to do is build a tool that would allow us to push them back to them, so that otherwise we just delete them. We're getting to a point, we're right on the very edge of the number of viewers and the amount of interactivity and so on and so forth, that we're going to have to start making hard, like especially when we open up 2.0, we're going to have to make a lot of hard decisions about questions, so and what I started finding myself doing is starting to accelerate. And the problem is we were just getting to a point where we weren't answering the questions very well. And I realized that it was easier for me to just push them back rather than, and we're looking for like a button that just pushes them back to everyone. Then you can decide whether you really want to bring them up again or not as a user. I am still trying to answer anything with more than 2 votes, because you can vote on your own in Makana. So it has to be more than 2 or 2 or more votes, and that number will continue to go up as we have more questions like that. Like the number of people that we're going to try to include in that process will go up as we have more questions. So and what that does is it really puts the onus on the producers to be active and vote on questions, which they've gotten better and better at over time. Next question.
Comes from Rotem Kirshen Mazikabet, I believe it, Batia, Israel. And he says, or she says, I would be happy if we could do a second hour on a live broadcast on a budget.
Yeah, I think it's a great one.
I think that's a
Talk
great
about budget
recurring one because that always changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Stan Chan, our friend in Roseville, California, longtime questioner, says, how about brainstorming the future tech of this industry and what innovations we can come up with?
Yeah, that's a great second hour. Hopefully someone puts that into second hour and votes it up, because I think that would, like, just talking about future future technology is always interesting, but I think that having kind of some brainstorming sessions like that would be valuable. And by the way, for our producers, I will tell you, because there's no guests here, that we're running low on questions, and we'll end early and go into after hours if you don't ask more. All right, next question.
Danny Law in Malaysia says, remote music production workflows.
Yes, soon, potentially very soon. Next question.
Rupert McRae, Dallas, Texas. Would there ever be a second hour topics more suited to Sundays where the show is not streamed?
I try to keep Sunday completely unstructured. We did do post-mortems for Mad in the Kitchen because it happened right after Saturday, and it kind of took over Sunday, and I felt like it either made Sunday really long, or Sunday started going into like an extra hour and a half because we were dealing with an hour and a half of Mad in the Kitchen discussions. And so I kind of decided I wasn't gonna do that again. It was kind of like, I like the fact that it's unstructured. And admittedly on my end, I just want to wake up not thinking about it on a Sunday. And so, but I think that it is a time when people can ask questions that might be a little bit more sensitive. Although we're usually pretty open to either way, but usually ones that maybe we don't want to feel like they're in YouTube. And they tend to be more philosophical, and we tend to wax on about things a lot longer on Sunday. Sunday is kind of almost this kind of middle area between after hours and office hours. Not even sure if there is a concept that I have that I'm not sure whether we need. I think we'll keep Sunday going. I've been like, why are we doing this without just doing after hours? But, just because it's not streamed, but it's because we're kind of structuring it and saying, hey, you can still come and ask questions, and we're going to still structure it. So we're hanging on to it, for that reason. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
On that same aspect, we could actually have an event on any other day where we just kind of turn off the YouTube stream and have it not streamed.
Yeah, I can't do that during the 5 days during the week because people have expectations. So we turned it off over the weekend, and I felt like I could get away with that for the education hour. But I do not want to. The reason that we didn't turn on streaming for a long time was specifically so we could bring people in and they didn't feel like they were being broadcast. And I didn't want to have a thing where we're doing it some days and not other days, because then people have unfulfilled expectations, and that leads to upset. Go ahead, Rupert.
So maybe from that point of view, could Sunday be sort of promoted more as a introductory step for people wanting to come on to the panel, but not certain about being streamed out?
Yeah, we definitely recommend that for the weekends in general. It's if I didn't feel like I'd make people upset, I would probably turn the recording off for Saturday, and we may do that. Like as we go into 2.0, Saturday may be not streamed. I'm not ready to do that just yet, but I'm trying to figure that out. And a lot of that would also be that it gives people the opportunity, after hours, of course, gives people the opportunity to play with their kit and figure out what it's like to interact with everybody. So we already have that to some degree. So I don't feel like as needed as it was before. Next question.
Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany is there a group in LinkedIn or somewhere else to find connections to interesting people for the second hour?
It's always somebody here knows somebody who knows somebody, and that's usually how it's worked. I don't know if we have a lot more organization to it yet. Go ahead, Rupert.
I think if you know people and you're connected with them on LinkedIn, that may be a reasonable means to contact them. I think seeking out people or going fishing literally on YouTube, on LinkedIn, you may just want to be a bit cautious about that.
Yeah, I know that as someone who fishes towards me at times, I don't usually appreciate it. Like if I don't already know you, especially if you friend me and then ask me something that I didn't need, I usually unfriend you immediately. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael is in and says, I can't wait to see Alex Gray and the ProtoStream team talking about multi-channel audio comms transport with the direct out Vivaldi platform. It's more than just musicians playing together.
Me too. we soon. Next question.
Chris Widener, Lafayette, Indiana, back with what about software streaming? Varying feelings, but Ecamm and Wirecast are great tools that can be very useful, especially with Zoom ISO.
We've talked about them a little bit in passing, but we haven't talked about them recently. I think that this group has leaned pretty heavily towards vMix, is with a little bit of Ecamm and, with a dash of TriCaster. So, and I think that's been my experience. Is the other ones haven't had as much use in this area. So, but if there's enough people that are interested in those, we could definitely talk about it. We answer questions around those areas. I don't know if it would hold a whole second hour. Next question.
Gus Libby in Satellite Beach, Florida says, could someone please post the after hours link in Mukana since it was left off the meeting notice?
Yeah, someone can post that in if you want in Mukana. Next question. Rupert
McCrae, Dallas, Texas, is a different question answer time ratio more typical in the second hour?
Usually the answers run a little longer, and especially if we have a guest, because I just let the guests mostly say what they're going to say. We definitely have. What's interesting is some guests just pepper through questions, and they just mow through the questions, and we'll do 30 or 40 questions in 40 minutes or something. And other ones really wax on about things, which is great. And both of them are super useful. And so I've learned to kind of let them run the way that they're going to run. For ones that we're doing internally, I think the frequency is about the same. Like we have a way of doing what we do. So we have a way of answering them typically. But when we bring external people in, we don't know exactly how they're going to answer that. And so that efficiency is slightly different. Leo can answer, or Andy can answer one question, whole show. And, but in other, like they can just take one question and run with it. And it'll be great, and then other people might answer questions 30 seconds at a time. Next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles comes in next with, how about an ongoing lab on Unreal Engine virtual production? Hey, we've been there.
We did that in the past. I think what we felt like we did was started too heavy, load all this stuff and download all these aspects and put all this stuff together. And it just didn't, we lost a lot of people, and so we didn't lose them, they didn't die, but they didn't come back. So anyway, what we're going to work on next is to start very slowly towards that again. So the MetaHumans that we're starting this Saturday is going to explore that. Where we're going is virtual production. We'll end up back at the same place, but we're going to start really slowly this time and make it much more Raspberry Pi-like, where we just kind of creep through really understanding MetaHumans and then really understanding getting those into Unreal, and then really understanding starting to build stuff around Unreal, and then really, because there's a lot of other things that Unreal can be used for much beyond just putting them on an LED wall behind people. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, I just echo that. I watched the sessions with Nick right at the beginning, and it was absolutely amazing. Blew my mind about what was possible, but I didn't have the level just to really get into it. And I'm only getting to the stage now where I can actually build more and more into that area.
Yeah, and what we want to do is it will be much slower, and it'll just be a lab, and we'll kind of work through it, answer lots of questions, and just try to get over that hump. What we're going to do is we're going to schedule them for an hour, and then the Q&A will run. It can run as long as you want. Like it'll be an hour of us talking, and then there's a 1 hour gap between the Unreal / MetaHuman and the cooking. That gives people like me time to go set up my kit for cooking, but gives everybody else can keep talking. So the people who want to do the cooking part can have time to do that. One of the other problems we had is we started scheduling so much into Saturday that it was like you had to jump from this and then jump for this and then jump for that. And then you came back and you had flour all over you and you're still trying to make Raspberry Pis. So there's a little bit of a process there. We don't want to rush anything. So we're going to leave bigger gaps between them, but you can keep on discussing it, but then we'll slowly move on to the next thing. Next question.
Ross Band in New York City says, is there a process for submitting recommendations for guests for the second hour?
Go, Jason.
I would say the very first way is to start with, I know this guy and he's why he's great. Pitch them and they will get upvoted.
Pitch them in the second hour, or you can talk to me about it directly. And again, we're going to be putting together a team with folks that can manage that conversation better than I can. And the one thing to be careful of is not to get them too excited or involved before we have them scheduled. You know, the hard part for me is I get pulled into a conversation and they're like, hey, we're going to put you into a second hour and everything else. And talk to me about it first and let's find a schedule first. Because it's mostly that I don't want them waiting for an email that's not coming because I'm busy and haven't figured out where to put them yet. Go ahead, Rupert.
Just wanted to get your thoughts on what, if one does know somebody, what the logic might be in like approaching them first, getting their feel for it, and then suggesting it as a second hour or vice versa.
I'd rather suggest it as a second hour and have us talk about it before we reach out to them. You know, I think that would be, it's just safer. I just don't want to have people upset that they didn't get invited. Next question.
Mike Potter of Hanover, Germany is back with second hour suggestion, pros and cons of chatbots.
I don't know. We do a whole second hour for that. I will admit to you that I am hugely against chatbots. I think we might have one little one in there that I still don't even know what it does that someone added and I don't know why it's there. And I hate chatbots. I know I love technology, but I like the humanity that's tied into it and having things do automatic. I'm a firm believer that, you know, to err is human, but to really screw things up requires a computer. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, we had a really funny picture that I took of the panel and I couldn't post it because one of the chatbots kept thinking that it was a bad picture. And I think that you have
Discord
one of our
chatbots?
Yeah, well, no, see, that's the thing is I think you have, there's a Discord chatbot, which I think is what was nixing it. And then whatever chatbots you add to that. So you have those two levels.
There's
of
one
complexity
chatbot
there.
that's in there and I don't know what it actually does. It was there from the very beginning and I have never seen it do anything. It starts with an Xer.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a Cliff that every time I tried to post that picture, it just knocked it right out.
Interesting. Next question.
George Sita of Webster Groves, Missouri says, has anyone reached out to Bob Heil about a second hour?
I reached out to them and it didn't happen. So I'll see if I can. I'll try to bring it up again. I know Bob, and so it was kind of odd, but it might have just a busy time. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I know Bob too. I mean, I don't think we should just all descend upon him, but I'm happy to send out an email too.
Yeah, we should get him on. He's a lot of fun. It'd just be a great second hour. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael has a topic overall, travel, shipping, and carnets. We've done that too, I think.
We've talked about it a little bit. We haven't talked about carnets specifically, and I've been working on getting Boomerang on to talk to about it. They're the company that we've used to do that. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, I think carnets is in the second hour suggestion. So if there's more interest in that, just vote it up.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Rupert McRae here in the panel. Does office hours need a universal central calendar showing second hours, community events, even hours labs, and even vendor events?
I think we're going towards that I think Kenn is kind of planning. He's plotting to give us a schedule. So we'll do that. I think that we are going to, there's this tension between letting everybody know where it is and then me not wanting to advertise it too much either at the same time. So I think that what we'll do is we'll figure out a place that's kind of a little bit of a members only kind of thing that people can log into and see what the schedule is as it goes down the path. Next question. Can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Carmi Vanzevik in Redondo Beach, California, who's here running office hours, part of the time, after hours. Is there an after hours guest we met named Craig McFarland who focuses on moving companies to the cloud? Lots of interesting history. So there is somebody he's promoting.
Yeah.
That, I guess.
Yeah, we'd love to have him on. So let's talk about it. Yeah, it sounds like it'd be a lot of fun. Next question.
And Rupert McRae's up next with, would the special subject ever be covered in the first hour and general Q&A covered in the second hour?
We probably wouldn't do that. A lot of that has to do with the fact that it gives people so the second hour viewership is higher than the first hour. The first 15, 20 minutes of the first hour is the edge warming. And so it's people getting they're getting the YouTube thing, and they're getting into it, and they're running late, and they're doing whatever. And so if you look at the actual view statistics that are going on, it makes more sense for us to not do the first hour the way we do it. It also warms the panel and warms the audience up and gives the audience time to ask questions and everything else. So there's a bunch of logistical reasons that the second hour is the second hour. Go ahead, Rupert.
I'm just wondering whether for like newcomers who come and join, if they join 15, 20 minutes in thinking they're coming into a discussion about XYZ, that they just might be confused that they've come into a general session and not realize that the special subject starts at the top of the hour.
We might be able to fix that with graphics. Like have like lower thirds as we go into into Office Hours 2.0 is coming up, at 8 o'clock or whatever, having things spin up. I will admit that I'm pretty insensitive to people being confused when they first show up, as people probably have learned about me, is that I'm kind of okay with it. People who leave that quickly, I know this is going to sound really rough, but people who leave that quickly are oftentimes not as valid a community member, and so from my perspective, that's part of the sorting process, is that it's not totally clear. You'll find that no matter how big we get, there'll always be these weird crevices that people have to kind of just know that they're there and go find them, or ask for them. I've always, when I had, I spent a lot of time really pushing Pixel Core in a much more public way, and we will push Office Hours in a much more public way in the fall. So once we get this all figured out, with Office Hours, and we get the new system up and running, we're going to promote it a lot, and it's going to be kind of the shiny front end that you just, you kind of see. And to your point, we'll tell you exactly what it's in. All the other stuff will still be pretty obscure, and that's stuff that people have to find. I'm a big fan of the martial arts thing on the top of the mountain that you have to sit 6 months outside to get in. I find that, that kind of thing, is something I like. Anyway, Jason.
More importantly, there is tremendous benefit, at least in my opinion, to providing structure to any regular show. There's a reason that, that happens in broadcasting. It gives people a sense of comfort, but it also, the moment people stick around long enough to realize the second hour, is the show title, and the catch-all happens first, it has its own merits and its own benefits, the likes of which are evidenced by the growing success. So I would say I almost never make sense to deviate from that.
And we play with it. We may have specials, or we may do something else. I will never say never to anything. We're always learning and figuring this out. But right now, that's my current thought. Next question.
The last one on the regular stuff here this morning. Carmi Weisvik is back with, have some talent to talk about talent issues. I know a few who have volunteered.
I don't know a few that have volunteered. So if I've missed a couple that have wanted to talk about talent issues, then let's ping me again. And happy to talk about those. Yeah, there's a lot changing. We definitely brought talent folks on and talked to them about stuff. But if I've missed some, just reach out to me again.
I think we've covered managing talent, right, in the past.
Well, I think Carmi's talking about talent, like people, actors or musicians, and we brought some of them on and asked some of the issues. I think Daria came on and talked a lot about her experiences and what she's kind of going towards, and so did everything from Peter Hillman and Brian Van Dark and other folks, the musicians that have come on. Maybe not as many actors, but we can definitely look at ways to dig into those things. I think it'd be great. All right, it was fun. It was good second hour. It's good for us to think about it. I think I need to do that every once in a while, because I just need to hear how people are thinking about it and what's going on, around the process. And let's just kind of dig it up. And we also I will admit, we get tons of suggestions every time we do this. So the second hour gets full, and so as I'm getting ready to hand this off to a team and work with the team on it, then I'm gonna, I wanted to fill up the bucket of ideas. So anyway, so I think that worked out great. So thank you so much to the panelists yet again for a great conversation, and thanks to our producers. Yeah, just the right number of questions as always. And we're on our way to 2 years. We've begun. We've passed 500 episodes, and we're now on to the next thing. So what are we going to do? I've already been thinking about what are we going to do at 10,000 X, because that's theoretically, according to Malcolm Gladwell, we'll be masters by then. So we'll have it all. We'll have this all figured out. Anyway, thanks so much. And we're going to jump into the after hours. All right. We'll see you tomorrow, or we'll see you in 30 seconds.